right. I also want to remind you, if you're just now tuning in, please hit that subscribe button. It would really help me reach more people with the content that you benefit from here on this channel. So if you appreciate the content and you want other people to learn from the content here, go ahead, do your part, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. I would really appreciate it. Well, let me share my screen and show you what's going on here with the Vatican on this situation with the Code of Canon Law. So here's a secondary source that talks about it, but we will take a look at the primary source from the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith. It's a pretty short note here, so we'll take a look at that. But first, let's look at the reporting on it. This is from CNA. Vatican may add spiritual abuse to crimes in church law. About time. Because there's all sorts of kinds of abuse. There's verbal abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, and there is spiritual abuse. It is a thing. The Vatican may make spiritual abuse a formalized crime in church law rather than merely an aggravating circumstance of other crimes. The Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith is forming a working group with the Dicastery for Legislative Texts with the task of analyzing the possibility and presenting concrete proposals on the matter, according to a paper from the Doctrinal Office, which we'll look at here in a moment, dated November 22nd. According to the note, which was signed by Fernandez, head of the DDF, and approved by Pope Francis, the term false mysticism is an overly broad and ambiguous expression in need of refining in certain contexts in the church. So they're tying in the question of spiritual abuse to false mysticism. False mysticism. The term appears in the DDF's regulation related to problems in behavior connected with the discipline of the faith, such as cases of pseudo-mysticism, alleged apparitions, visions, and messages attributed to supernatural origin, the note observes. Now, I have to just add, this is all fine and well, but there are some more prevalent forms of spiritual abuse, specifically clericalism from some priests who do engage in a great amount of, not all priests, obviously, but there are a fair amount of them who do engage in a significant amount of spiritual abuse of the flock, of the laity. And I think that needs to be addressed as well, not just limiting the discussion to spiritual abuse in relation to false visionaries, alleged apparitions of false mysticism. Again, I'm in support of having penalties of spiritual abuse in that context too, of course. But there is, again, a wider and broader spiritual abuse that's taking place on part of some clergymen and the way that they treat the laity in so many instances. And I think that really needs to be addressed, maybe even before this other stuff of false mysticism or pseudo mysticism, as they put it. The expression false mysticism is also sometimes used by canon lawyers in the context of crimes of abuse, though it is currently not a delict or crime. According to canon law, the document said. The DDF said that false mysticism also appears in the Dicastery's 2024 document on the norms on apparitions, where it is specified that the use of purported supernatural experiences or recognized mystical elements as a means of or a pretext for exerting control over the people or carrying out abuses is to be considered of particular moral gravity. At a press conference introducing the norms in May, Fernandez warned about the ambiguity of the term false mysticism and the need to clarify its use. Church authorities must be careful. False mysticism is used a lot and in a lot of different ways. The term can have one meaning for one theologian, another for another theologian. And for some canonists, it has one meaning. For others, it has a broader meaning. Fernandez said the church must explain well what the crime is, but not use the term false mysticism. That's fair. Maybe give kind of a list, even with some examples, perhaps. It is possible to classify a delict of spiritual abuse, avoiding the overly broad and ambiguous expression of false mysticism, the letter this week says. Working group will be chaired by the prefect for the Dicastery for Legislative Texts, Italian Bishop Filippo Lanone. Let's take a look at the actual document itself from the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith. Interesting they have it in Latin here. I don't think they normally have it in Latin, do they? Not complaining here. I'm a fan of the Latin language. The term false mysticism appears in the regulations of the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith with a very specific context, namely issues related to spiritually and alleged supernatural phenomenon, which now are handled by the doctrinal section. This includes problems and behavior connected with the discipline of the faith, such as pseudo-mysticism, alleged apparitions, visions, and messages attributed to a supernatural origin. In this context, false mysticism refers to spiritual approaches that harm the harmony of the Catholic understanding of God and of our relationship with the Lord. I mean, hey, here's a great example. We are seeing some people in Texas right now. A group of, or a monastery in Texas that now says Pope Francis isn't the Pope. So their set of contests, even though they deny their set of contests, but they will outright say Francis isn't the Pope. So they're in denial on what the term set of contests means and how it applies to them. Well, they're saying that this is all part of a vision from God, a message from God. In fact, this is the same group that gave us the first divine emoji. God gave us a divine emoji in one of these messages. I have a whole video on it. It's pretty interesting if you want to watch that. I'll put it in the show notes. Well, I digress. This community is saying all kinds of wild stuff in the name of God and actually using the active voice saying, I am God, the Father, blah, 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 and giving a message. I am Jesus, and blah, 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 giving a message. And saying all kinds of stuff that is harmful, dangerous, and false, including, again, the promotion of schism. I think this might fall within that category of a pseudo-mysticism and the spiritual abuse that is in scope here in this document, because there's certainly spiritual abuse when a person claims to speak from God and yet the message doesn't come from God. There's certainly abuse going on there. Okay. So it says, it is in this sense that the phrase appears in the Magisterium. For example, Pope Pius XII rejects a false mysticism, the conception of God present in the Jansenist groups, which did not account for the mystery of the incarnation and their spirituality. It is wrong, therefore, to assert that the contemplation of the physical heart of Jesus prevents an approach to a close love of God and holds back the soul on the way to the attainment of the highest virtues. This false mystical doctrine of the Church emphatically rejects, as, speaking through our predecessor of happy memory, Innocent the 11th, she rejected the errors of those who foolishly declared souls of the interior way ought not to make acts of love for the Blessed Virgin Mary, the saints, or the humanity of Christ. For love directed towards those is of the senses, since its object are also of that kind. No creature, neither the Blessed Virgin nor the saints, ought to have a place in our heart, because God alone wishes to occupy it and possess it. Obviously, the Pope is rejecting that error. So it says, there is no delict in canon law classified by the name false mysticism, even though canonists occasionally use the expression in a manner that is closely tied to the crimes of abuse. However, in the new norms on the supernatural phenomenon, the DDF specifically or specified that the use of the purported supernatural experience or recognize mystical elements as a means or of a pretext for exerting control over people or carrying out abuses is to be considered of particular moral gravity. This consideration allows the situation described here to be evaluated as an aggravating circumstance if it occurs together with the delicts. At the same time, it's possible to classify a delict of spiritual abuse, avoiding the overly broad and ambiguous expression of false mysticism. It's proposed to entrust Dicastery for Legislative Text and the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith the task of analyzing this possibility and presenting concrete proposals, forming a working group between them, chaired by the prefect for the Dicastery of Legislative Texts, signed by Fernandez, audience on the day of 11th of 27th of 2024 with Pope Francis, signed by him as well. So I, again, welcome the potential advent of delicts for the issue of spiritual abuse. Certainly think that would be helpful to put into the Code of Canon Law. But again, I hope that it's not just specifically tied to false mysticism or false visionaries and stuff like that. I hope that it's much broader than that, and that there will be penalties for those clergymen who engage in spiritual abuse. Because again, I do think it's fairly prevalent among some of the clergy. So I wanted to bring that to your attention because I thought this was absolutely fascinating, and I'm not really seeing anyone having any conversation about this. I'm kind of surprised about that. Um, so maybe this will get the conversation going. What do you think? Do you think that there should be penalties in the Code of Canon Law for spiritual abuse? In my mind, I'm thinking, I mean, this is long past due. It's a no-brainer for me. But I'd love to hear what you have to say. Are you ready to deepen your faith and sharpen your understanding of theology? Welcome to the Center for Theological Research, your gateway to transformative learning. At CTR, you will find in-depth courses designed to equip you with the tools to grow in your understanding of the faith. Explore courses like the 7 Ecumenical Councils and uncover the foundational truths that shape Christianity. Master the ability to determine the level of a doctrine in the Theological Notes course. And in the Logical Fallacies and Apologetics course, you'll learn to spot the logical errors often encountered in non-Catholic apologetics content. Also, check out the ebooks that are available to you for free. Start your journey today. Visit ctresearch.org and take the next step in your faith formation. Hey, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the content. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, the like button, and if you want to support the channel, visit patreon.com/Reason and Theology.